War, it has always been the bane of man's existence. Since the days of the caveman, scurrying for food, we have all been cursed with the need to make violence with those who do not fit in. What would happen if those who fight suddenly turned to their leaders and said, "No more"? Hello, I am author and paranormal investigator Donald Allen Kirch, and this is Stranger Than Fiction.
Forget the world you know. Enter a bizarre dimension where the strange and unusual guide your imagination towards the unimaginable. Life is stranger than fiction in these true stories, where the ordinary is replaced with the extraordinary. Explore strange legends, weird myths, and odd folklore. The facts are laid before you to examine. You're invited to draw your own conclusions on these true stories of the paranormal.
December has always been a special month for us. To those of the pagan faith, it holds within it boundaries of the Feast of Saturn. To those of the Jewish faith, of course, it holds the Hanukkah celebration. To Christians, it is second only to the month of Easter, commemorating the birth of Christ. During some turns of the Islamic calendar, it contains the holy holiday of the Festival of Sacrifice, commemorating the choice Abraham made when he was ordered by God to sacrifice his only son as a means of testing his love. Wiccans see it as a pivotal month, where December also contains the winter solstice. More recently, for African Americans, it is the month of Kwanzaa. In short, December holds within its days and weeks an abnormal amount of collective power. This power, it seems, came to a head on December 25th, 1914, in the heart of absolute chaos. No one certainly knows how it started, maintained its momentum, and still continues to amaze both ordinary people who remember it and those who try their best to explain it. Before the war, France had been a nation in turmoil, just barely surviving the highly motivated and anti-Jewish political scandal known as the Dreyfus Affair. It was an attempt to calm the people's fear that high-ranking Jews within the French military had been plotting with German and Austrian spies to help topple the government. This, of course, did not happen, and Dreyfus himself was nothing more than a sad victim of hate and bigotry. He sweated years of his life away in the famous Devil's Island prison, an innocent man. Only later, through both faith and honor, after having his prestige restored, was the man later given the rank of major and served honorably until his retirement in 1908. At the outbreak of war, however, he returned to duty, serving his nation with pride. World War I was to be a short one, or that is how the governments involved had sold the idea to millions of volunteers who willfully signed up. With the advancements of science and the wonders of modern warfare, Fritz would soon find himself in one hell of a dilemma. This simply would not be the case. Fritz had advanced his methods of war-making too. The German imperial forces had forged a fantastic war machine. In fact, most of the real battles fought in the Great War had been victories for Germany. It was only after the reality of trench warfare that the true horrors of battle in the 20th century came into play. What made the Christmas miracle of 1914 so plausible was in the fact that the war was still young, and the soldiers involved on both sides had not suffered enough blood or loss to have their hearts hardened into what was needed by both their commanders and nations. The Great War was indeed the last gentleman's war, the last bastion of civilized fighting, if one could ever call the field deaths of over 37 million civilized. There had been nothing like it in the collective mind of man. Some, optimistically, called it the war to end all wars. Nations cheered their brave soldiers with brass bands and kisses from pretty girls, never realizing that they had naively ushered in 4 years of horror, tragedy, and conflict. Entire nations would soon change their views upon the world, making way for a greater and more horrific conflict in another generation. Historians would later call the Great War simply World War I, if ever such a title could be so simple. The First World War gave birth to several modern ways of fighting that we all now seem to take for granted. Automated weapons, chemical weaponry, and the agonizing reality of trench warfare. Empires would rise and fall, and U.S. President Woodrow Wilson would be the first to suggest the idea of a United Nations. But none of this mattered to the ordinary foot soldier. For the common soldier of the First World War, the center of his universe began and ended with mud. As the Christmas holiday approached and the reality of war was sinking in, the soldiers fighting started to receive home parcels filled with the well-wishing hopes for peace.
Haven't forgotten us on Christmas Day. I say, Harry, old boy, I see you've had a letter. Oh, and a photograph too, you sly dog.
Yes, I've had a loving letter and a photograph, Jack, all the way from dear old England.
The British soldier, or Tommy as they were called, got plum puddings and Princess Mary boxes, a small tin filled with cookies, chocolates, butterscotch, and even had tobacco. Each held a picture of Princess Mary wishing them all a safe return. The German soldier, or Fritz, received a small cardboard box containing a pipe, tobacco, cigars, and a letter of profound thanks. Although trivial by our standards today, these small tokens were like a ray of hope to the men surviving the horrors of war. When it seemed as if the First World War couldn't become more a unique experience, there came the letter for a temporary ceasefire. This letter did not come from the halls of power in Paris, nor was it issued by the military offices of the British Empire. It came from the goodwill of the common man. A letter was handed to the commanders of the British trenches near a small Belgian town, respectively requesting an end to all hostilities on Christmas Day. A bold statement. It was also followed by a sincere invitation for all the officers of the Crown to enjoy an open concert performed by German soldiers at 7:30 that night. Candles would line the enemy trenches, marking the amazing event.
Blimey, now I've seen everything.
What's up, mate? Get the proverbial letter from the missus? Leaving you?
It's a special invitation from Fritz. He wants to call a temporary truce for Christmas.
Awful bad taste, that. Is he quite serious?
He seems to be. Think I might just give this a go.
It's your hand on the plate, sir, if Command ever finds out.
It will be Christmas, mate. The men are in need of some peace, if only temporary.
The big buggers in Paris will be having a time of it. That you can be sure.
I'm taking Fritz up on this one. Who knows? We may just end this joke of a war before it can get any further.
Right you are, sir.
The British accepted, extending a gift of their most valued tobacco as a means of holiday respect. The guns stopped firing.
Dear God, let the men sleep. Too much fighting. Allow the British to see the joy of this proposal. A separate peace for the day of our Lord.
Commander, the British have said yes to your proposal. Christmas Day will have peace.
Thank God.
Decorated Christmas trees soon found their places in the middle of the no man's land between the enemy front lines. Candles were lit, as promised, and sore throats fatigued by the task of war started to sing in the night with the hopes of peace. From some reports, sworn enemies risked their lives to venture out upon the fields to walk with and embrace and later exchange gifts with those they had been sworn to kill and had been killing only hours before. Then the reality of the situation came into focus. The high command and the politicians started to discover what was happening. Stationed in comfort within the luxurious French chateau some 27 miles away from the front, the generals and command officers read the reports in disbelief. Enraged that no casual reports were coming in, the officers in command started to issue harsh and life-threatening orders to all commanders and officers of the line.
You are hereby ordered to cease friendly actions with the enemy, to resume behavior of that expected from a British officer in a time of war.
One would think that such orders, harshly written and silently suggesting stern action if not implemented, would have been followed. Even the Kaiser roared with rage, hearing that his soldiers were clasping Tommies in delightful friendship upon the hills at the front.
What do you mean we are having no casualty reports? No man fighting? This is war. We fight and kill during a war. If they do not return to their posts, they will be shot.
Most of the orders were ignored, or not taken too seriously. The Christmas miracle had begun, and there was no stopping it. Surprisingly, the German High Command's orders were accepted by their officers with the same light.
Sie, Oberkommando, haben uns befohlen, das Aufhören, Feuer aufzuhören und fortzusetzen, den Feind anzugreifen. Ich lehne solch eine Ordnung an diesem festlichen Tag ab.
Rations were exchanged between smiling men who had been bitter enemies. Soldiers who had been barbers in civilian life gave free haircuts to their foes. American cigarettes were passionately passed among the battling forces, and strained carols were sung, filling the horrific fields with hope. Dawn that rare Christmas day saw an optimistic rush of men on both warring sides, with a feverish exchange of souvenirs before the men were quickly called back by their cautious officers, with extended offers to hold a ceasefire for the day and to play a football match. In the end, the offer of the match came to nothing. However, later on, after the feeling of peace had set in and a lack of discipline, 50 brave souls gathered up enough courage to approach the Germans, and as legend has it, a match was played. Germany won. On a more somber note, a united force had been gathered to help bury the dead. One British company commander had been court-martialed for assisting Fritz in the course of burying their fallen. It was only later, when it was discovered that the commander was a relative of the Prime Minister, that the charges were soon dropped. To help make sure that no other official truce could be called without the knowledge of those in charge of the politicians back home, artillery bombardments were ordered on Christmas Eve to try to ensure that there were no further lulls in combat. Rotations of troops also became a common practice, so that neither side could become too familiar with the other to feel compassion or brotherhood for their fellow man. Deliberate dampening of hostility still occurred, but nothing like those of the Christmas miracle. At one particular point in the Christmas peace, a British soldier paused in his celebrations when he heard a German soldier say out a prayer and cheer for freedom. This startled the young man from Southampton. He remarked, "Excuse me, dear German friend, but did you not just toast for freedom?" The German, a clerk by trade, answered to the affirmative. He was indeed fighting for peace. The Englishman could not believe his ears. As salutes and cheers were bantered about, he and the German continued with their talks. How could Germany be fighting for freedom when, according to the British, it was they who started the war? "Oh, we fight for freedom, my English friend. God is on our side in this, I do assure you, sir." The English soldier took a cup of wine from the man. It was a bitter vintage and less superior than most he had enjoyed while in France, but it was given with a kind and open heart. There was the urge to challenge the German, but this being Christmas Day, he thought it best not to fight politics. Both continued to get mildly drunk. It was, after all, the day of peace. Politicians on both sides issued stern threats. Orders had to be followed and policy maintained. This was the price of civilization. Both governments seemed to consider this unheard-of pause in war-making to be both a threat and a deterrent.
Who are these soldiers to dictate to us, the soul of France, how to fight this war? The Germans had started the conflict. They had paid the price for their arrogance. Order the men to take up their arms and kill the German hold. There should be no Christmas peace.
So, to help maintain their job and importance, the politicians stopped the peace that the humble foot soldier had both the heart and the mind to start. A British Tommy named Bruce Barnesfather, who served throughout the war, said this about his Christmas experience.
I wouldn't have missed that unique and weird Christmas day for anything. I spotted a German officer, some sort of lieutenant I should think, and being a bit of a collector, I intimated to him that I had taken a fancy to some of his buttons. I brought out my wire cutters and with a few deft snips removed a couple of his buttons and put them in my pocket. I then gave him 2 of mine in exchange. The last I saw was one of my machine gunners, who was a bit of an amateur hairdresser in civil life, cutting the unnaturally long hair of a docile Fritz, who was patiently kneeling on the ground whilst the automatic clippers crept up the back of his neck. It was all well right and good, it was.
In one report, issued by a medical officer in the Royal Welsh Fusiliers, these words were written about the forced end of the Christmas miracle.
At 8:30, I fired 3 shots in the air and put up a flag with Merry Christmas on it. And I climbed up on the parapet. The Germans put up a sheet with thank you on it, and the German captain appeared on the parapet. We both bowed and saluted and got down into our respective trenches, and he fired 2 shots in the air. And the war was on again. Never again did I see that German. I hope the bugger made it through all right.
And indeed, the war did continue onward. 3 more years, ending with the involvement of the United States as a result of the German sinking of the passenger liner Lusitania in 1915, although it took an additional 3 years for the Yanks to go over there. Politicians tend to read the Christmas miracle of 1914 as a temporary blip in the course of world events. However, it gives one hope that even within the heart of darkness, the common man can, and indeed does, take it upon himself to rise above the body politic, achieving the impossible goals that even the most skilled statesman cannot. Perhaps that is why this certain miracle hasn't been so well told. General Sir Horace Smith Dorrien, commander of the British Second Corps, was irate when he had heard what was happening and issued strict orders forbidding friendly communication with the opposing German troops. Adolf Hitler, then a young corporal in the 16th Bavarian Reserve Infantry, was an opponent to the truce. In any case, it is the profound and well-wished hope of this particular writer that we all learn from this historic example. If you would like to see my work, go to my website at donaldallenkirch.com. That's Donald Allen, A-L-L-E-N, Kirch, K-I-R-C-H.com, one word, donaldallenkirch.com. My books are available in both ebook in print format and can be found on Amazon and BarnesandNoble.com. It would be an honor to entertain you. So, for Stranger Than Fiction, this is Donald Allen Kirch wishing you unpleasant dreams. Good night.